Peace, peace. You are now rocking. This is this is the Leave of Logic podcast. Peace, peace, peace. It's Brother Fahim. You are now tuned into the Leave with Logic podcast. You know the vibes. Welcome back to another episode of Leave with Logic. I am your gracious and humble host, Brother Fahim. Hey man, listen. Life is always moving at an electromagnetic pace. I try to keep my boots laced so I can win the race. Lot going on, lot going on. Man, I've been trying to get this podcast done for a second. It's long overdue, long overdue. Mr. Orenthal James Simpson. Today is the 22nd, and he died. So he died now. He died about 12 days ago. He died on April the 10th. He was 76 years old. The famous running back, the famous actor, and the famous trial of the century defendant, Orenthal O.J. James Simpson. Yeah, he got out of here. And it was just super interesting, the response that he received, the send off that he received from the American society, from society here in America. It was something else. And man, it brought to my mind a whole bunch of things because I was a youngster when that case first broke, when it first happened. I was a young guy and I had no idea of the implications that it would have on me and on society at large going forward. And so now, as an adult, as a grown man, I fully understand and thoroughly understand his legacy and his meaning, not only to Black people, but to the American culture and the history of America. OJ has a prominent place in that history. So we're gonna go over it a little bit. You know, it's crazy. Different artists take on different reiterations or different meanings, right? You know, when you look at somebody like Michael Jackson, this dude started his career in the early 60s. Well, late 60s, excuse me, late 60s. And it spanned all the way up until he passed in 2009. But he looked different for different people. When I was coming along, he was the moonwalker, he was the thriller. For my older brother, he was with the Jackson. He was shaking you, he was telling you to shake your body down to the ground. Uh, and for my children now, he's this guy. He's all of those things, but he looks quite different, and he means something a little bit different. So I say that to say, all of these athletes, all of these famous figures have that in common. And OJ was no different. OJ was really no different. He meant something different to everybody. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share my screen so that we can take a look. We can take a look at a little bit of information about Mr. O.J. Simpson and who he was. Just a little bit of info that I think y'all might need to check out. So this article is it's online. Y'all can catch it. Biography, right? And biography.com. And it's O.J. Simpson. Former football star O.J. Simpson was acquitted of the murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend following a high-profile 1995 criminal trial dubbed the trial of the century. This is Mr. Orenthal James Simpson himself. Uh, O.J. Simpson, who was O.J. Simpson? Former NFL football player and convicted armed robber and kidnapper, known for being acquitted of the murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman. Prior to his high-profile legal entanglements, Simpson was a college football superstar at USC and won the Heisman Trophy in 1968. He later enjoyed a record-setting career in the NFL and tremendous popularity among his fans amid a moderately successful post-playing career as an actor and broadcaster. Simpson was charged with the June 1994 murders of his ex-wife and Goldman. He was acquitted in a widely publicized criminal trial. I'm gonna go down just so we can get some quick facts. So we're gonna go over this. So his name was Orenthal James Simpson. It talked about how his aunt his aunt there it is. His aunt gave him the name Orenthal, supposedly the name of a French actor that she liked. He was born July 9th, 47, and he died, of course, April 10th, 2024. Birthplace was San Francisco, California. Man, he was a Bay Area cat. He had two spouses, Marguerite Whitley and Nicole Brown Simpson. Marguerite, they had three kids. They had Arnell, Jason, and Aaron, which was the young lady. She died when she was 2. She drowned, and then he then moved on and married Nicole Brown Simpson from 85 to 92. So yes, 67 to 79 was his first wife, and she was a black woman. And then from 85 to 92, he was married to Nicole Brown Simpson. And it lists the children right there. I thought this was interesting. He had rickets and left him pigeon-toed and bow-legged, and he had to wear a pair of shoes connected by an iron bar for a few hours almost every day until he was 5 years old. That was something that I found interesting when I read this, because I know Wilma Rudolph was another person who struggled. She had polio in her youth, and it was hard for her to walk, but she overcame it, such as did O.J. Simpson. But so OJ uh, first gained fame as a two-time All-American halfback at the USC Trojans, setting NCAA records and winning the Heisman Trophy in 68. Let me back up a little bit. Let me back up. Let me back up. Simpson, okay. I wanted to show you guys. Simpson was from the projects in San Francisco, right? He was from the projects. Let me see. Here we go. He was raised by his mother in the rugged, largely black Potrero Hill district of San Francisco. At age 13, he joined a gang called the Persian Warriors. One fight landed him in the San Francisco Youth Guidance Center for nearly a week in 62. So you talking about a cat that was from the projects. O.J. Simpson was. Um, in a video I'm going to show you, he talked about how he was aware that football was just the platform. He was always talented in baseball and football. He understood that football was the platform that was going to get him to where he was going, but he always saw himself as much more than just an athlete or a football player. He wanted to capitalize on his talents, and that's just what he did, right? But yeah, he was a junior college transfer, and he played junior college his first 2 years, and then he transferred to USC, where he would win the Heisman Trophy. Uh, played for the Buffalo Bills. They nicknamed him the Juice, where he topped 1,000 yards rushing over 5 consecutive years, from 72 to 76, and led the NFL in that category 4 times. It's arguable. You can argue and debate that between O.J. Simpson, Jim Brown, and Ernest Dickerson. For those games, it was O.J. Simpson who was the best running back in history. That's arguable. But he played for the Bills, and then he was traded to the 49ers, where he wanted to stay because he was a hometown. He wanted to go home and retire, and he did. And so, yeah, um, he did some acting after retiring from professional football in '79. Simpson moved on a profitable career as a sportscaster and an actor. And he had dabbled in acting while still an active athlete, notably playing a man framed for murder by the police in '74 in a movie called The Klansman. How ironic. How ironic. Simpson later appeared in The Naked Gun in 1988 and its sequels, playing a dim-witted assistant detective alongside actors Leslie Nielsen and Priscilla Presley. Yes. So yeah, I'm gonna show y'all something. Let me stop sharing this. I'm gonna show y'all a little something. Then we're gonna come back to this article. Like I said, reiterations. And this is important for young people, because a lot of young people have no idea how storied OJ Simpson is, and also uh, you know, just how phenomenal he was and how multifaceted he was as an athlete. You know, I like to think that O.J. Simpson was like one of the protocols for somebody like a Will Smith, right? He had that universal appeal that everybody could be reeled in by, that everybody was attracted to. I mean, he was a good looking brother too. They don't talk about that a lot. OJ was good looking. You know, he was statuesque. He was built, super built. And he was, you know, he was a bit more tolerable, and he was a bit more charismatic and likable than the great Jim Brown was. Jim Brown was my man too, but Jim Brown wasn't smiling as much. Jim Brown wasn't as friendly with the media, and Jim Brown didn't care about universal appeal. Jim Brown, he wasn't uh, a grumpy guy by any means, but he also was to himself, and he was unapologetic about that. And I love Jim Brown for that. And he was a bit more committed to the black community, Jim Brown, by his way of support. But we're gonna get into that also. But I want you guys to see a little something about Mr. OJ. I'm gonna share this. It's a little clip about OJ Simpson. We're gonna get into. So you guys check this out. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. But here we go. It's the legacy of O.J. Simpson, pro ESPN. This is what ESPN had to say about him.
O.J. Simpson always needed validation from those around him. And he found it in football, even from an early age in the rugged 1960 San Francisco neighborhood of Potrero Hill.
As a kid, I always knew I would be a professional baseball or football player. Football has been my vehicle to come out of the ghetto or to get everything I've got. And I think I have a lot more to offer, but it was football that put me on that stage to show OJ, say everybody liked OJ Simpson. Well, everybody wouldn't know me to like me if it wasn't for football.
Simpson's followers grew when he reached USC in 1967.
Soggy pitching to Simpson. They won't get him. He's being convoyed in 80 yards for O.J. Simpson.
He set 19 rushing records en route to 2 All-America selections and college football's most prestigious award in 1968.
The officers, governors, and members of the Downtown Athletic Club, I'm delighted to present to you this 34th Heisman Trophy, symbolic of your achievement as the outstanding collegiate football player in the country. Congratulations, O.J.
Thank you.
As the 1969 draft grew near, O.J. thought he'd be staying in Southern California to play for the Los Angeles Rams. He wound up trading sun and sand for snow and ice.
Buffalo selects O.J. Simpson, halfback, University of Southern California.
With the Buffalo Bills, the juice was indeed loose. He won 4 NFL rushing titles and broke 1,000 yards rushing 5 straight times. And on December 16, 1973, at Shea Stadium in New York, he went where no NFL runner had ever gone before. 2,000 yards in a single season.
O.J. running left. O.J. 5 more. There it is. He did it. We're going to get 2,000 coming out of the game. That's it. He's coming out of the game.
The Juice retired from the NFL in 1979 after 9 years with the Bills and 2 with his hometown 49ers. He retired as the league's second all-time leading rusher with over 11,000 yards, trailing only Jim Brown. Being liked was not hard for O.J. on or off the field. In addition to being a dominant running back, he became a dominant product spokesperson, especially for Hertz Rent-A-Car.
By the time Hertz hired me, it showed itself in their increase in sales, and I like to think it opened the door for a lot of other guys to get contracts from corporate America.
He went into acting as well, appearing in the acclaimed 1977 miniseries Roots, and eventually appeared in 20 movies, including a memorable recurring role as Detective Nordberg in the wildly popular spoof trilogy The Naked Gun.
Oh, no. Oh! He's getting closer.
Good. Should see him any minute now.
Keep your eyes peeled. Oh, no. Look in. He's real close now.
Step on it. You enjoy acting?
I enjoyed it. It was something new for me. It was pretty much like school. It wasn't easy for me to do. You know, football has been pretty easy for me to do, and this was a little of a challenge.
At his 1985 induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Simpson mentioned the woman with whom he would forever be linked.
My wife, Nicole, who came into my life at what is probably the most difficult time for an athlete at the end of my career. And she turned those years into some of the best years I've had in my life.
O.J. Simpson and Nicole Brown were married in 1985, the year he entered the Hall of Fame, and 6 years after his divorce from his first wife and high school sweetheart, Marguerite Whitley.
I'm gonna stop it right there because you got quite a bit of information. But I wanted you guys to see just how prestigious and heralded O.J. Simpson's football career was, right? When he was in USC and also with the Bills and the 49ers. Now, something important I want you guys to remember. And I said we were going to go back to it. You know, O.J. Simpson was married twice, right? He was married to Marguerite Whitley, and he met her when he was in high school. She was actually AC, the famous AC, I think it's AC Cowan, I want to say, who was in the white Bronco with him. She was actually dating him, and OJ slid in there. OJ slid in there and hooked up with her, and they had 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, Arnell, Jason, and Aaron. Aaron died drowned in the swimming pool. Yes, and so, and you know, when you listen to people speak, when you listen to people talk about different aspects or different memories that they share about OJ. OJ was we saw OJ a lot in black outlets, black magazines like Ebony and Jet. OJ graced that cover several times. Him and Marguerite. They had a beautiful family. He had a beautiful career. He was just doing so well. He was doing super duper well. But I read where, you know, like anybody else, man, OJ had in any marriage, man, it's ebbs and flows, it's mountaintops and valleys. And so he had issues like married people do at times. And sadly, it ended. It ended in divorce. I'm gonna go back to so we can get a little bit of information on who exactly these young ladies were that he married, or at least what's written about them. And then we're gonna go to his football career because it's something also that people forget, because OJ had a few meanings, right? His legacy to black culture, his legacy to American culture. It's a little bit different, right? It's a little bit different, and it's for different reasons. Now, here's OJ's wives and kids. Simpson was married twice and had 5 kids, 4 of whom are living. Simpson married Marguerite L. Whitley on June 24th, 1967. They had 3 children together, Arnell, Jason, and Aaron. Their daughter, Aaron, who was born in 1977, died a month after her 2nd birthday when she drowned in the family swimming pool. Simpson and Marguerite divorced in 1979. While still married to his first wife, Simpson met 18-year-old waitress Nicole Brown. Their nearly 12-year age gap didn't deter their relationship. After several years of dating and living together, Simpson and Brown married in February of 1985. She took the name Nicole Brown Simpson after their nuptials, and the couple had 2 children together, Sydney and Justin. Yeah, OJ had the perfect family, right? He had it was picture perfect, right? And you see it right there. You see this. Yeah, he had the picture perfect family. Uh, a son, a daughter, beautiful kids, beautiful career, and you know, it ended. And then he married Nicole. Now, this wasn't anything. This is just my conjecture. This is just me, right? This is nothing that I read or that was documented. But coupled with OJ's apolitical and his stances on black movements, I'm sure that was a sting to the black community. Here it is, OJ Simpson, super good looking, super successful, super beautiful family, and he he trades it all in for this 18-year-old white girl. I'm sure that wasn't it stung a little bit, just a little bit. Um, but now again, um, OJ had it was a few instances that OJ has shown where he was a little bit different, and he wanted to be viewed differently. OJ Simpson did. When you watch OJ Made in America, it was a activist. I think he was a Panther. He said, in '68, you had what was going on was the Black Power movement, right? And so in the '68 Olympics, you had a diversion of thought. You had two different trains of thought, and it was exhibited by different groups. While you had George Foreman to wave the American flag in the boxing ring when he won, you had John Carlos and Tommy Smith to put up their fists, Black Power and Black Unity. Now, when OJ was approached about it, this is on the OJ Simpson Made in America. He said, "Man, OJ was like, I'm not getting into that. You know, I'm not black. I'm OJ." That was what was written about that. Now, I brought up a article called "50 Years Ago." Alcindor and OJ were both leaving LA, but their paths quickly diverged. Something else I want to say uh, is about the Muhammad Ali summit. When you look at the Muhammad Ali summit, you see Lou Alcindor, which was later Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You see the late great Jim Brown. You see Bill Russell, all sitting or standing behind our brother, our dear brother, the champ, the greatest, Muhammad Ali. Who you didn't see was O.J. Simpson. Uh, I know Jim Brown had words about OJ and the type of athlete that he was, right? Taking an apolitical stance, not involving himself with black politics and the black plight and the black struggle. Jim Brown didn't look too kindly on it. And I understand Jim Brown's plight. I also understand OJ's plight. Uh, OJ wanted to be more marketable. OJ wanted a massive appeal. And OJ understood early that if he involved himself with the black consciousness or with the black struggle, he would lose out on a wider white audience. And now I would say even other non-white, right? He would have uh, excluded himself. He would have ostracized himself. And he didn't want to do that. He wanted that commercial appeal, that commercial marketability. But in this article, I'm getting ready to share it with you guys. Again, these are all things that you guys can look up. These are all articles that you can go and read. It's an article that you can read. And here we go. 50 years ago, Alcindor and OJ were both leaving LA, but their paths quickly diverged. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'll summarize it. This talks about, OJ and Kareem or Lou Alcindor at this point, how they kind of were both in LA at the same time, and how they were a little bit different. I had the opportunity as a young boy to meet Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he was a little bit reserved, kind of abrasive. I understand it now. Again, as a man, I get it was hard living in a bubble for Kareem, being poked at, being prodded as though you're some alien. And then he didn't really, he was about, he was about intelligence. He was about black people, and he was also about Islam. But he wasn't as charismatic and he wasn't as inclusive as O.J. Simpson was. But this says here, in '69, Lou Alcindor and O.J. Simpson were set to move from the warm familiarity of Los Angeles to the chilly unknowns of two mid-sized Rust Belt cities, Milwaukee and Buffalo, ooh, New York. And yet, as much as they shared, they were in many ways opposites. Let me go down. Let me go down. So just a little bit. When you read it, it'll talk about again their careers. Uh, it says here a JUCO transfer. Simpson didn't burst into the national prominence until he got to USC, coached by John McKay. Set team records for rushing in his junior and senior years in 2 Rose Bowls and won the Heisman. We know about that. He was also an All-American sprinter, helping USC set a world record in the 440-yard relay in '67. OJ was an all-around specimen. OJ was a specimen, y'all. Alcindor, by contrast, was a national phenomenon in high school, setting a schoolboy scoring record in New York in an era when freshmen didn't play varsity ball or leaving early for the pros. He led UCLA to 3 national championships and was named the tournament's most outstanding player each time. Now, this is what I wanted to bring. This is what I wanted to read. This is why we're here. The public thought of Simpson as a reputation cemented by his ads for Hertz, which showed him running through airports. On campus, Simpson told Life, "Yeah, I find students now stopping and staring at me. I guess I like it though." Because of his early fame, Alcindor, even as a teen, interacted with celebrity athletes. With celebrity athletes, Wilt Chamberlain loaned him suits. He trained with Bruce Lee, Jackie Robinson, recruited Alcindor to his alma mater, UCLA. As a college student, he joined Jim Brown, Bill Russell, and other professional athletes at the famous Cleveland Summit in 1967 to discuss Muhammad Ali's opposition to the draft. Yet Alcindor was seen aloof, a reputation fueled in part by the school's athletic director, who had forbidden the entire freshman squad from communications with the media. And Alcindor found most UCLA students closeted bigots who couldn't relate to black people. In '69, Sports Illustrated cover feature My Story, Alcindor wrote, "It wasn't long before I realized that certain cats who hated my guts were giving me the big Pepsodent Beach Boy smile and saying, 'Hello, how are you?'" So we see right there early on, Lou Alcindor was a little bit different from OJ, right? He attacked that race issue right on. OJ was a little bit, uh, he stood off from it a little bit. But where is it? Where is it? Here we go. Fame brought expectations, especially when it came to social justice. According to Sports Illustrated, Simpson told USC's Black Student Union that, "I don't have to go through any changes to prove that I'm black enough. I am black. I knew it the day I was born when hundreds of athletes decided to boycott the New York Athletic Club track meet that was scheduled to open in the new Madison Square Garden in February '68 because the club was exclusively white." Simpson joined their ranks. He told Sports Illustrated, "I wouldn't run that weekend if my mother was holding me." Okay. So he stepped in. But Simpson rebuffed 1968 Olympic boycott organizer Harry Edwards, telling the New York Times that organizers tries to use him. "I'm not enlightened on the situation. I don't know what they're trying to do." When a reporter from the Daily Trojan student reporter newspaper asked his opinion of John Carlos and Tommy Smith, raised fist protest during a 1968 Olympic medal ceremony, Simpson said, "I respect Tommy Smith, but I don't admire him. I think they're going about the boycott the wrong way. You can't change the world until you change yourself. All this is going to do is make some Negro kid in high school football who isn't playing first string quit saying, 'This guy isn't treating me right.' Being perceived as a militant would ruin the bigger picture." During a night out with Robert Lipston of the New York Times in the summer of '69, he famously told the writer that whites didn't see him as black, but as OJ. So we see that OJ did stand with those who were boycotting that club, but he also made statements about John Carlos and Tommy Smith. And he said, "I'm not black, I'm OJ." And maybe you youngsters probably heard that on Jay-Z's 444, the story of OJ, when he said, "I'm not black, I'm OJ." Okay. So, yeah. So I wanted to bring that out, those two issues. OJ has his black family. OJ has he's almost America, he's almost Black America's superhero, right? And he has this amazingly overwhelming appeal. to the masses, right? Uh, on the other hand, he kind of distances himself from the black struggle, the black plight, and that was a part of his legacy, and that's important for those people to know who were uh, outside of the black community, because you know when we saw that OJ verdict, uh, many people assumed that it was just because OJ was black, we were jumping up and down. That wasn't it. It wasn't just because he was black. We're gonna get into that. But I wanted to establish that OJ took a different stance on social issues that dealt with the black plight. And also, OJ switched. He went from a black family, a complete black family, to a blended family, if you will. It was blended with black and white. And so all of these things have to be taken into consideration when we consider who OJ was and his meaning to American culture. So yeah. So yes, that's who he was as a student, OJ Simpson. But I want to show y'all something, right? And this was funny to me. I saw it in passing. I always thought this was hilarious. And this is how some people remember OJ Simpson. This is how OJ will be remembered to a lot of people. Yeah, OJ will be he'll be he'll be remembered this way to a lot of. OJ. I'm gonna show you guys something. This is for you youngsters who have never seen this. This is who OJ was, man. This is what was going on. So this commercial was from 1968. This is excuse me, 1978. It's from 1978. I'm tripping. He was at USC in 68. But here it is. Watch my man OJ. Watch the juice.
Nobody does it better than her.
Nobody does it better. Leads the others by far. Nobody does it best of all. You hurts the superstar.
Nobody has more of what it takes to rid you of Fairmont, Mustang, LTD, or other fine car faster.
Hurts the superstar.
You know it.
OJ said, "You know it." OJ was the man. He had that appeal. OJ was the man. So yeah, we saw where he had he was in commercials. He had stock with Honey Baked Ham. I think he owned some Honey Baked Ham. And he was in Roots. A lot of people don't know that. In the beginning part of Roots, y'all should go check that out. Alex Haley's Roots, which was inspired by Malcolm X, or at least that's what we're told when he's interviewing Malcolm X, when he does the autobiography as told to Alex Haley. Malcolm he informs Haley that, listen, a good percentage of those slaves, of those Africans that came over and made slaves, they were Muslims. And when the story goes, when Haley traced his lineage, he found that to be true. And then he created this mini series. You could even say it was a docu-series, and it was called Roots. And OJ played runner. They had a rite of passage in Roots. In African and antiquated African cultures, there was a rite of passage. You didn't just step into adulthood. You didn't just step into manhood or womanhood. You had to show and prove that you were ready to step into that role. And one of the roles was going out and completing a task. And on the scene where Kunta has to run and do something, and he's running, and he got like a 2-mile head start. And here come OJ. He catches up to him and catches him and gives him some advice, and helps him out with his rite of passage. But yeah, so fast forward to 1994. think it's June 10th. We were watching the NBA finals. We were watching the Knicks play the Houston Rockets, right? Because at this point, Michael Jordan had left the NBA. So the title was up for grabs, right? And then all of a sudden, we see this white Bronco. It was doo-doo, 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 you know, breaking news. OJ Simpson is on a slow speed chase on the 404 in Los Angeles. And, he's in the car with AC Cowens. And we're like, what? Hurts OJ? USC OJ? The juice OJ? Marketable, universally loved OJ? Nah, this couldn't be. Well, it could. It absolutely could. And from what we saw for the next 9 months, uh, was nothing but OJ Simpson. It was like he was all over the TV. Some people describe it as the first reality television, must see TV. OJ was everywhere. I mean, OJ was everywhere. Whew. And I remember my mom was like, God dang, I'm so tired of this OJ stuff. I don't know what to do. It's everywhere, man. You can't get rid of it. Um, and so it began. The trial, they named it the trial of the century. That's how important it was to American culture. Um, Now on both sides, on the defense side, you had Robert Shapiro as the lead. You had F. Lee Bailey. These are all at least F. Lee Bailey. F. Lee Bailey's, he had a storied career in LA. And I mean, he was the way I see him, he was like Perry Mason. For you youngsters, y'all go look up Raymond Burr. He was Ironside in the 80s, right? But in the 60s, he was Perry Mason. That's how F. Lee Bailey was. He had a reputation like that. He was pretty legendary. But you had F. Lee Bailey, you had Robert Shapiro, you had Carl Douglas, you had this guy who had daughters who had married this airline stewardess named Robert Kardashian. And the story goes that Robert Shapiro was good, but somewhere along the line, OJ said, "Nah, I need Johnny Cochran to lead my team." Now, who was Johnny Cochran? Johnny Cochran was the man. He was a lawyer who was undefeated against the LAPD officers' brutality, right? Hadn't lost a case. Johnny Cochran. Now, one of the more he represented a lot of people. He represented Michael Jackson. He represented Stan Tookie Williams. Y'all go look Stan Tookie Williams up. Jamie Foxx played him in a movie in 2003. I want to say 2003 or four. I want to say 2003 called Redemption. It was on FX, and he wrote a book. I read the book, but nonetheless, he also represented Geronimo Pratt, right? So Johnny Cochran is a guy who we need to celebrate. If you talking about celebrating fighters and black warriors who really struggle in the cause of the black plight for freedom in America, in the wilderness of North America, you have to add Johnny Cochran to that list because he was something else. But nonetheless, Johnny comes on board and he's undefeated. Now on the prosecution team, you had Marsha Clark and you had Chris Darden. And the lead detective was a Mr. Mark Furman, right? He was the lead detective. He wasn't on the prosecution's team, but he was the detective that was supposed to testify against Mr. Simpson. But nonetheless, Chris Darden was was the opposite. He had never lost a trial for police brutality. So while uh, Johnny Cochran was defending against it, right, for the victim, you had Chris Darden here who was protecting the police, and so they had never met. But they didn't know what they were in for. Johnny Cochran was so cerebral; he would wear uh, kente cloths, African cloths, as a tie, so that the jury could see, hey, we are for black people. This is about race. Let's not ever take that out. Um, when they scanned OJ's home, this was all strategy now. When they scanned OJ's home, he had him put all the black photos up. Something like that. Right? All the black photos up in his house. But they were previously not there, right? They weren't there at all. And so Johnny Cochran was the mastermind behind the defense, and it wasn't just his strategy that won it. I'm gonna show you some things that lost it. Not only were they out lawyered, if you will, not only did they lose, they were out lawyered. Let me say that. Not only did they just lose, but they were out lawyered as well. And so uh, Johnny Cochran was the leader of that. Now there was a few things that were going on um, in 1994. It was a couple of instances that had happened that had set the stage for O.J. Simpson to be acquitted. Right. First and foremost, it was the Rodney King verdict. We all witnessed Rodney King be brutally beat on the highway by, I think, I want to say 5 or 6 police, and he went to trial, and they were all acquitted. And it was crazy because when they interviewed those officers, leading officer or their sergeant in charge, he said they did exactly what they were supposed to do. They were within their training. It was only the last 10 seconds that those 53 blows that were administered, only the last 10 seconds were really uh, fatal or potentially fatal. And they were acquitted. They walked. Yeah, they walked. And it was a huge outcry. It was huge. Um, that sparked different establishments, much like the George Floyd, where you saw people burning down buildings. There were buildings burnt down all over the country, right? There were riots. It was just an outcry. It was an outcry because the injustice had gotten to an all-time high uh, with that verdict. And then more so than that was Latasha Harlan, right? I'm gonna read to you guys, and I'm gonna share the screen again so you can see this article, so y'all can go and look it up. Latasha Harlan, she was a 16-year-old girl who goes in a Korean store, convenience store, and she puts her orange juice in her backpack. She goes up to pay for it, and the clerk, or the lady behind the counter, she grabs her, and they begin to tussle. And when Latasha punches her and gets her off of her, she puts the orange juice on the counter, much like Mike Brown, right? She puts the orange juice on the counter, and when she turns around and walks away, the lady shoots her point blank in the head. And I'm gonna read to you all. This is an article. Hold on. Let's go back up. I want y'all to see the name of the article. So it's Slate reserved the right to vetch. It's history. LA riot or uprising. What happened after Rodney King? So it says, can you tell our audience a little bit about the Latasha Harlan story and how that played into the LA riots? A couple of weeks after the Rodney King beating, Latasha Harlan, a 15-year-old black girl who lives around the corner in South Central LA, goes into a convenience store and was accused of stealing a bottle of orange juice by the woman behind the counter, a Korean immigrant named Soon Ja-do. In seconds, the confrontation escalates to the point where Soon Ja-do shoots Latasha in the back of the head. It was not a huge story nationally at this point. This is not a common occurrence, but it's not infrequent. It's not an infrequent occurrence that there's some sort of a fight or murder involving storekeepers and black people in South Central LA. But when the trial came around and the surveillance tape from the community store comes out, and it shows Soon Ja-do holding a gun, aiming at the back of a 15-year-old girl's head and shooting it and pulling the trigger. that really infuriated a lot of people. You see, that was here we have something on tape. This is the second time that we have proof. It's unequivocal. There's nothing you can say about this, right? You cannot, there's no way around it. This is not anything, this is substantial. This is not circumstantial evidence, right? This is direct evidence. Now, let me define that. Let me define that real quick because I'm going to talk about this later. Circumstantial and direct. That has a lot to do with the criminal and the civil. So, circumstantial does not tell jurors what happened. It requires jurors to draw conclusion. That's circumstantial evidence based on the evidence. And it's admissible in court. A lot of what the OJ trial was built on was circumstantial evidence. Now, what's direct evidence? Any physical evidence or witness testimony that directly proves the fact in question without a need to connect the dots or make inferences based on evidence. So, what we saw with Rodney King, what we saw with Latasha Harling was not circumstantial. It was direct evidence because the jury didn't need any type of story, right? Didn't need to connect any dots. They could see it for themselves. It was right there on tape. Now, that inflamed a lot of people. I've told you these basic facts about the case. Well, what if I told you the jury found Soon Jadu guilty of voluntary manslaughter? The judge does not send her to any jail time. Does not sentence her. I'll say the judge does not send. It says send, but I'm gonna say sentence her to any jail time. And it's such a huge miscarriage of justice in that way. Black people who have been living in this city for years and have seen so many acts of brutality and just like the remorseless violence against them. And you can't even get jail time for something like that. Of course, it's inflamed people. And I would argue, in having talked to the people that we have, that the shooting of Latasha Harlem played as much of a role in why LA went up in flames as Rodney King. It's viscerally jarring even today. I've had to look at that video to write these scripts and stuff and to report. And it's shocking to see a girl just get shot in the back of the head and fall to the ground like that. It's just really heartbreaking. It's as bad as any of the videos that we see today, like the Philando Castillo, the George Floyd. It's pretty damn bad. And then it says Latasha Harlan is really, as you're saying, the catalyst to the level of anger and frustration that people felt. So that, yeah, the flame was already starting with Latasha Harlan's. It was Rodney King that sort of lit the match. Yeah, it was. And it deals with that. If you read on, it deals with the Black and Korean relations at that point. Right. So, yeah, what we saw was a lot of direct evidence that should have convicted those officers and that Korean lady Soon Jadu. But the judge, she stepped in. Not only did she step in and not give the lady any jail time, she said she knew criminals, and she could look at this lady and tell she was no criminal, and that was that. So this is the backdrop of LA. This is the backdrop of what's going on during the time leading up to OJ Simpson. There was a lot of inflammation in the mentality and the emotional status of the people. People were upset, as they should have been. That was unjust, and we have been suffering injustices. You know what I mean? It's since been a lot of injustices happen, right? But nonetheless, OJ has his dream team. The prosecution have their team, and they start the trial. And 9 months. That was the only thing that we were able to watch for 9 months. And I don't think people were really watching it. I just think people were inconvenienced by it because they already had their biases and their minds set on what it was that had happened. I'm going to show you guys something. I'm gonna show you guys something that I remembered. Seeing, and that's when I said, "Oh wow, they really trying to get this guy." And I later learned, uh, as a college student, that narrative and framework has a lot to do with how people perceive things. I'll give you an example. When the Katrina, when Hurricane Katrina happened in Louisiana, there were two articles, and we looked at them, and they were side by side. One was of a white man pillaging, or a white man, excuse me, not pillaging, a white man, going through the water, and a black man going through the water. Under the white man, it said, helpless father selflessly seeks food for his children. Now, with the black man, they said, uh, man pillages and looks to rummage and steal. Looks through the water to rummage and steal. But they set it up in a way that you didn't know what these two men were doing, but the way that it was framed would have you criminalize one and uh, 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 praise the other, right? So that's what kind of happens. And that's not what kind of happens. That's exactly what happens, right? In the media. That's why it's so important for us to lead with logic and use facts and evidence when we are trying to come to an intelligent conclusion. If we are just trying to be led by emotion, well, then we can let our experience and let our triggering speak for us. But if we are wise and we seek out knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, we will always have to use uh, our highest sense, which is reasoning and rationale. And that takes some logic. Let me share this with you all real quick. Whoever's out there with me. This was what I remembered seeing and thinking to myself, wow, this is crazy. This is really crazy. This is nuts. Hopefully it'll pop up. It's a photo. O.J. Simpson, An American Tragedy. Man, this is OJ's mugshot. And I remember this was on Time Magazine. This is probably worth a little bit now. It's probably worth a little mint now. But man, they really framed it. They really did a great job framing this and making him look as guilty as possible, right? An American tragedy. He had only been accused now. I did a build about the New York what is it, the New York Adult Survivors Act. I want to say that's what it is. A few months back when all of these charges were being filed on Puffy and Cuba Gooding Jr. and Marcellus Wiley, a lot of these influential men. And I discussed how, the accused and the convicted can never be treated the same. And they should not be, because we live in America, right? Where you're innocent until proven guilty. That's what we boaster. But that's not what we practice, though, is it? No, that's not what we practice at all. And here it is. O.J. Simpson, An American Tragedy. They put this out. This was June 27th, 1994. They put this out for the public, and it really made O.J. just look horrible, right? It made him look bad. Some people say, well, a mugshot is not supposed to look good, and it's not, but they've shaded it, they've darkened it, and they've labeled it an American tragedy. So that's to my point about how framing, how when you frame a thing, the media can frame something and make a good man look bad and a bad man look good. But the trial of the century, it begins, and man, it was pretty intense. But there were a few things. I'm gonna go over some notes that I wrote about the trial. I went back and watched a little bit of the footage, read a little bit of the transcripts, and got a better and more clear understanding because back in those days, it was just guilt. It was either he's innocent or he's guilty. He's innocent or guilty. There were no real facts, and it didn't seem like people were watching close enough or taking good enough notes to where they could really explain what was happening. And so, yeah. So again, let me start by saying this: the evidence was circumstantial in OJ's trial. That means that it needed to be explained, right? It required that you tell the jury what happened. It wasn't anything direct. There were no witnesses. No one saw OJ do this. So everything was going to have to be circumstantial. That's number one. A couple major points for consideration, right? Uh, and this is what I found. Blood in the Bronco, right, was Nicole and Ron's. Uh, forensic blood splatter expert Herbert McDonald reported that there was less than one drop of blood in the Bronco. So they asked the question. Well, I asked the question, how is there less than one drop when such a blood-filled violent struggle ensued? One of the things they said in court was, man, it was all this blood in the Bronco, and the DNA was there. But when they looked at it in the lab, they found out that it was less than a drop. But if you saw that crime scene, it was gruesome. It was, I mean, it was. Whew, I don't know what it was like a. It was like a horror film. Like you pick one. It was like your favorite horror film, Jason, Freddy, whoever. It was crazy. So how is it that there's less than a drop of blood in OJ's vehicle? That's what the that's what the uh that's what the expert reported, right? Um how the crime scene was handled and its implications for the lab work. That was another major point of contention, right? This is what the defense team, this is how they were able to be victorious. The way the criminologist on the scene collected the evidence. Dennis Fong, he was the criminologist, and he got on the stand and admitted that it was very erroneous and very much out of protocol in the way that he handled the DNA. The way it was initially processed by the laboratories, that was an issue of contention, right? These are all things that led to OJ being acquitted. And the way the medical examiners dealt with the crime scene, those three things. So the criminologist didn't handle it right. The laboratory did not have any type of protocol. Their procedures were erroneous. And then the medical examiners, the way the crime scene was maintained. Now I'm gonna go into a little bit more detail. These were the problematic procedures. Uh, large camera crews. It was a media. That's when the term media circus comes in. Large camera crews. They were always around this crime scene and these dead bodies. Um, this caused Detective Lang to cover Nicole's body. Now, instead of using a sterile, neutral crime scene from another place, he takes a blanket from inside of Nicole's home and places it on her, right? Now, what does this do? This compromises the blood patterns, foreign hairs and fibers, the integrity of the victim's body, all of these things. So now you can't say, okay, these are foreign. How did this get here? How did that get there? How did this get there? Well, it's DNA on these things. So now that has become nullified because again, You took something from inside of the victim's home that clearly has DNA strands in the fibers and in the fabric and placed it on her because there were so many cameras. There were so many people walking in and out and in. That was number one. The blood evidence was contaminated. I mentioned it before, Dennis Fong. Improperly handled of blood swatches had allowed blood to break down beyond the point of being able to recognize or identify DNA. When they took the blood, it's supposed to be put in a swatch, like a Q-tip, you put it in a little swatch, and it's supposed to be dry. It was wet. That would allow for bacteria colonies to form. And then on top of that, it was placed in the hot California heat for hours. This all degraded the quality of the DNA. This was the criminologist on the trial. This was the criminologist. This was the guy who was supposed to be making sure that the integrity of all of this, of everything that had to do with the blood of this crime scene stayed intact. He failed to do his job. People collecting blood, etc., at the crime scene were not changing gloves. Now he lied about this. They asked him when he was when he was sitting in the chair on the bench, "Hey, did you change your gloves?" He's like, "Yes, I'm sure I did." They showed a video of him, no gloves on, no gloves at all. So he was handling this blood. Imagine that. He's handling this blood with his bare hands. Commingling of the evidence, people walking in and out of the crime scene. Blood swatches were wet in container cultivating bacteria growth. Left plastic bag with blood samples in California sun to degrade evidence. This was done by the criminologists, right? These were the people that were supposed to be making sure, again, that this blood stayed intact and the integrity stayed where they could get an accurate read. So when all this was established, guess what they had to do? The blood that they say that they found on the gate, the blood that they say that they found that was OJ's, the blood that was in the Bronco, it was all thrown out because experts said and they proved that it had been mishandled. And by the way, the laboratory that did it, they had no protocol, no procedures, and a lot of people were untrained at this laboratory. This was all in the OJ case. Dennis Fong not only was caught in a lie about wearing gloves when collecting blood samples, also when labs were analyzed, the sloppiness of the procedures prohibited the test results to be relied on. This lab was operating without protocol, without standard procedures, and no training. No training. Horrible. Horrible. I wish I had some sound effects because I remember the late great Kevin Samuels. He used to do that slap. That was slap worthy on their part. How you gonna have any type of justice to emerge and you can't even? Y'all got people. Y'all sending blood samples to a lab that's not even training people. What kind of stuff is that? This was interesting. Police returned to the crime scene, and this is all documented. This is all from the court documents. This is all from the trial. You guys can go back and watch this. Police returned to the crime scene 3 weeks after initial crime scene investigation to find blood. Protocol dictates that all findings be reported upon completion of initial crime scene investigation. Basically, something was found after the fact. So once they looked at the crime scene, it was good, nothing. But then they go back 3 weeks and they find something. Blood found had not decomposed as much as the blood that had been collected from OJ by the LAPD only hours after the crime. OJ had submitted, he had agreed to, give blood right after they arrested him or right after he turned himself in. Now, that blood that he had given was not as much decomposed as the one that OJ had given. And that doesn't make sense because you would think after 3 weeks that blood would be more decomposed, but it wasn't. Right, the blood that OJ gave um, uh, 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 was more intact. Uh, um, yeah, blood found had not decomposed as much as the blood that had been found collected from OJ by the LAPD only hours after the crime, and that's kind of impossible. It is impossible because it should have been out there for 3 weeks. It should have been decomposed, right? But it was fresh, and this led to the uh, the the theory, the very plausible theory that it had been planted. Forensic experts Herbert McDonald, again, Henry Lee claimed blood found on OJ's socks did not permeate into the socks, and due to the blood being surface level, it was transferred onto the socks. Let me say this: the way the crime scene happened, it would have been blood squirting everywhere, right, including OJ's socks. Now, the socks that they found that were not there when they first did the initial crime scene investigation at his home, they had blood that it had gone through from the front to the back. Now that's impossible if a person has their foot into the sock. That's what they were saying. It didn't permeate, meaning it didn't travel all the way through it, right? What it did was, it would have been impossible for that to happen. So the only way it could happen is if somebody put blood on the sock, right? EDTA is a substance injected to blood to preserve and prevent clotting. Uh, Blood on socks and labs had higher concentration of EDTA than normal. Your body makes a small dose of EDTA, but now EDTA is also what they use to preserve blood in crime labs in police stations. So here it is. This blood had a high level of EDTA. How does that happen? How does that happen? Unless somebody came out there and tampered with it, right? Now, um, I talked about who Mark Furman was. Mark Furman was the lead detective who was to testify at the crime scene against OJ. He was the one that they put up there to bring the trial home, and he said it in a recording. The case depends upon me. If I go down, then the case goes down. Um, Now, he was the first on the scene at Brown's condominium alone when he found the second glove. Now, the question was this that the defense team asked: how did Mark Furman find a second glove when 12 other crime scene investigators missed it? And he's alone at the time when he finds the glove. So 12 other detectives didn't see it, but you saw it. He had met a woman, and she was in North Carolina, and they had a fling from what she said. But she was writing a book, a screenplay about cops, and he was a cop, and he was giving her all kind of information. You know, in these tapes, I'm sorry, she was recording him, and she was putting him on tape. And in these tapes, he was found using the N word, and he was also found uh, admitting his disdain for not only black people but women as well. In fact, it was proven that Mark Furman was a part of a internal tribunal in the LAPD called MAW, Men Against Women. And what they would do was they would hold these invisible tribunals against men that they felt were fraternizing with women. They would harass the women. And if you were a man and you were seen showing favoritism or fraternizing, then they would punish you maybe for a week, a month, however long. And they would humiliate publicly these women. It got back to the defense team that these tapes existed, and Johnny Cochran and them, they had to go down there and subpoena the woman because she wouldn't give them up. Initially, they didn't want to. The courts in North Carolina did not want to enter that in. They didn't want to make that lady. And I'm gonna show her here in a second. They didn't want to make her give up the tapes. They felt like that it wasn't important. Johnny Cochran was like, "Oh, that's very important." Are you serious? We gonna get those tapes, buddy. What did Denzel Washington say? I'm from the street. I'm leaving with something. I'm leaving with something. And he did. And rightfully so. It was 18 tapes. Judge Ito only allowed 2 of the tapes to be played in court. And they had to fight for that. Now, on the tapes, I'm gonna let you hear what was said. But the other tapes had proof that Mr. Furman had not only had negative things to say about black people, but he had also tampered with previous crime scenes, right? It was proven that he had. And so let's go right to that. I thought that was interesting. See, I didn't know that again until I looked. I had no idea what was what Mark Furman's real significance was in the OJ trial. But when I when I found out, I was like, oh. When I did a little research, I said, oh, I see. Now this is a OJ Simpson trial documentary from 1995. This is Judge Lance Ito. He was the presiding judge of the case. I'm gonna try to get it. Let me see. This is Mark Furman's section. This is his segment. Let's see what he has to say.
By criticism of her.
The Simpson case takes a most unusual turn on August 15th, when defense attorneys find that the Furman tapes contain derogatory references to blacks, Jews, women, and Judge Ito's wife, LAPD Captain Margaret York. Outside the presence of the jury, prosecutors pressed Judge Lance Ito to withdraw from decisions on 2 key issues. Should jurors hear the Furman tapes, and should Captain York be called to testify? Judge Ito agrees his connection to York may create an appearance of impropriety.
I therefore recuse myself from the issue of the tapes themselves, and specifically whether or not Captain York is a material and relevant witness.
Marcia Clark intimates this may not be good enough.
The only road to take is to not to waive any matters in this court and to proceed with a complete recusal from this point forward.
If Judge Ito withdraws from the case entirely, as Clark suggests he should, the proceedings could very well end in a mistrial. But Clark backs down the following day.
Although our review of the case law indicated that we are entitled under the law to seek the course of full recusal, we have determined that it is not the only course. And although the law does not expressly provide for a partial waiver of conflict, in consideration of all of the factors, Your Honor,
I'm gonna fast forward a little bit.
That's just right out.
At the courtroom over the next several days.
You're trying to find a bruise on a nigger? Pretty tough, huh?
Judge Ito allows defense attorneys to play the hate-filled Furman tapes. He has yet to decide how much, if any, of the tapes the jurors will hear.
Basically, work in practice movements. Niggers. Teresa. I practice my kids. You know why we stopped the show?
Tell me, please.
We stopped the show because a bunch of niggers have a bunch of these organizations in the South End. And because all niggers are choked out and killed 12 in 10 years. Really extraordinary, isn't it? First thing, anything out of a nigger's mouth for the first 5 or 6 sentences is a fucking lie. That's just right out.
In addition to Furman's racist remarks, the world hears him brag about abusing power and citizens.
We basically tortured them. There's 4 policemen, 4 guys. We broke numerous bones in each one of them. Their faces were just mush.
The defense plays additional excerpts, which they say reveal the witness's attitude.
I'm the key witness in this case. And if I go down, they lose the case.
I think it's important to put ourselves in the position of the jury looking at the testimony of Mark Furman. I know that's hard after we've read all of these transcripts and listened to all of these tapes and come to the sickening realization of who Mark Furman really is. Los Angeles' worst nightmare. probably the greatest liar since Ananias. But the jury has only seen a very polished and professional performance that was carefully orchestrated, in which Detective Furman sounded more like a choir boy.
After the tapes are played, the attorneys argue about how much, if any, of the tapes the jurors should hear.
I am deeply offended, and I'm shocked, and I'm disgusted with what I've heard. But I cannot afford the luxury of being Marcia Clark, the citizen. I am Marcia Clark, the prosecutor, and I stand before you today, Your Honor, not in defense of Mark Furman, but in defense of a case of such overwhelming magnitude in terms of the strength of the proof of the defendant's guilt, that it would be a travesty to allow such a case to be derailed with a very serious and important, but very inflammatory social issue.
This is not something that I can rule upon from the seat of my pants. I need to sit down and look at each one of these individual situations and make the appropriate ruling.
Outside the courtroom, arguments rage.
I don't understand why the hell we had to listen to 2 hours of this hate. It's disgusting, every word that was said. But there's no reason that it had to go out on public airways all day long, and more to come. It's exactly what I said it would turn into a week ago. This is now the Furman trial. It's not the trial of O.J. Simpson, who is accused of murdering my son in a coal.
In a 10-page ruling, Judge Lance Ito decides the jurors will hear just 2 relatively innocuous portions of the Furman tapes. In a big blow to the defense, Ito also bars the defense team from playing any of the 18 taped instances in which the detective bragged about fabricating evidence, framing people, and other police misconduct.
Pause. Judge Ito stopped any of the playing in court of the other 18 tapes where this man admitted to fabricating evidence and tampering with crime scenes. You know, any loss of life, any innocent loss of life, we don't celebrate that. And we sympathize with any people that loses. But now, if we're talking about justice and justice being had, there's a protocol for that. So while Mr. Goldman, I understand it and I sympathize with him and his family. Having lost someone, I understand what that means. Not having lost him as gruesomely as he did, but I understand nonetheless losing someone. But now, again, you have to understand this is justice, and hearing all of those tapes, hearing these things, that the lead detective who was testifying against this man, that's absolutely relevant. And see, that denotes us not engaging in reality culturally, right? We don't engage reality the same, a lot of us, because and I see this in conversations in real life, in conversations online, people totally disregard facts and logic and go strictly with their emotional triggers, their experience, and how they feel. And oftentimes, the only person that navigates through the world based on their feelings is a blind man or a blind woman. Let me go back to something else. We're almost done with this segment.
This statement is from Mr. Garcetti. While we decry racism, these tapes are for another forum, another time, and not this murder trial. The court's ruling today will help keep the focus where it should be, which is on relevant evidence that allows the jury to determine whether Mr. Simpson is responsible for the murders of Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman. Now, let's get on with this trial and get it to the jury.
Absolutely.
After a full week without a word of testimony, the jurors return to court. The defense offers a series of witnesses who tell graphic tales of Mark Furman and his racist exploits.
He said that if, when he sees a black man with a white woman driving in a car, he pulls them over.
And what did you say?
I was taken aback a little bit, and so I kind of paused and I looked at the Marines and I just said, well, what if they didn't do anything wrong?
And what did he say?
He said he'd find something. And he said if I had my way, I'd gather, all the niggers would be gathered together and burned.
Officer Furman turned around, looked at me, and told me, I told you we'd get you nigger.
He said, the only good nigger is a dead nigger.
Laura Hart McKinney made the Furman tapes. She planned to use them to help flesh out her screenplay on Big City Cops.
During the time that you talked with Mr. Furman, during this 10-year period of time, did he ever use the racial epithet, which I'll call the N-word, during the course of your conversations with him?
Yes, he did.
And in the course of your preparation of your testimony here today, can you tell the jury how many times you've counted that he used that word?
Approximately 42.
42 times?
Finally, Johnny Cochran plays the excerpts Judge Ito has allowed the jurors to hear.
Can you compare that with the other 42 times or so that he used this in the course of your interviews? Is there any difference between how I use the term there and the other 42 times or so? Objection. Oh, you may answer.
Yes, there's a significant difference here. This particular example is the least offensive and inflammatory in comparison to the others.
The next, perhaps most dramatic moment in the defense case takes place outside the presence of the jurors.
Detective Furman, was the testimony that you gave at the preliminary hearing in this case completely truthful?
I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Have you ever falsified a police report?
I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Is it your intention to assert your Fifth Amendment privilege with respect to all questions that I ask you?
Yes.
I only have one other question, Your Honor.
What was that, Mr. Furman?
Detective Furman, did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?
I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Mindful of how damn
that was the lead detective who was supposed to be testifying for the prosecution, and he was found to be a racist, bigoted, misogynist, liar, right? And by the way, Mark Furman only received, for that lie that he told, he only received a $200 fine. That was it. Now, perjury carried a sentence of 3 years in prison. He only got a $200 fine. So what does that say about justice? That's crazy. That is so crazy. But y'all heard for yourself all the evidence against him. And a lot of legal experts and legal pundits say that that was really what won or got the acquittal for Mr. Simpson, because all of their evidence had been tampered with. Their lead detective was found not only to be a liar, but a racist and a bigot. And then it was just poor lawyering on the prosecution's part. But let me read what I wrote. Heard on the tape saying the N-word and called his baton the end stick. That was something else. He pled the fifth when asked on the stand, did he tamper with evidence? He pled the fifth. A woman testified that Furman said that the only good end is a dead end. You saw that. So that, along with careless handling and collection techniques, robbed the evidence of its power. And you guys saw this. Judge Ito wanted to not allow the tapes and recorded to enter as evidence, right? He only allowed 2 of them in there, right? And you saw the lady say, hey, that was irrelevant. We saw Ron Goldman's dad say that it wasn't a case about race. It was a case. He didn't see the relevance of it. It was all about OJ being a murderer. Mr. Furman commits perjury and only receives $200 fine that carries up to 3 years. These are some of the factors. Now, it was a lot more. They had the glove and it didn't fit, that famous line. The glove, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. You had a variation of things that happened. And one of the theories was that OJ stopped taking his blood pressure medicine in order to swell, his fingers to swell, so that when he tried the gloves on, they wouldn't fit. One of the jurors said that she didn't understand why that they made OJ put the glove on. It backfired. Carl Douglas is the only surviving member that I'm aware of the Dream Team. Johnny Cochran has passed. He died in 2005. Robert Shapiro has passed. Robert Kardashian has passed. F. Lee Bailey has passed. But Carl Douglas has a practice in L.A., Douglas Hicks Law. I watched him and Stephen A. Smith. He said nobody was aware that they were going to have him try the glove on. And it's further confirmed by the juror that says, hey, we didn't know that. They add the prosecution, you know what I mean? They wanted to do that. But he said, we didn't plan anything. There was no blood pressure medicine that we didn't take. We had him stop taking. None of that. The glove did not fit. And I might not have said this in my notes. What they did was they took the glove, they soaked them and drenched them in blood, because the manufacturer had claimed that the gloves would have shrunk by 10 to 15% had they been soaked in blood. And so they took gloves and they soaked them, the same gloves, and soaked them in blood, and they shrunk less than 1%. And so again, that nullified that theory that any of that stuff was credible. Now I'm gonna go to what I remember. Being in school. What I remember about this whole OJ thing. It was 3 things I remember. I remember the Bronco. I remember the trial being extremely long. And I remember, more than anything, the verdict. Yeah, I remember the verdict. And so when the verdict happened, I was like, ooh, wow. I'll never forget where I was. I was in school and my teacher, I was 8th grade, and my teacher goes, children, put your pencils down. The OJ verdict is getting ready to be announced. And that was the first time that I kind of understood the significance and the relevance of what was happening. But let's watch it, though. Let's relive it.
Founded.
No one knows what this means.
The world is left to wait and speculate.
Quick verdict. What does it mean?
Well, normally in this kind of case, I'd be very afraid that a quick verdict, in fact, means an acquittal, because it's hard to imagine a jury deliberating after 2 hours to send someone to prison for the rest of their life. However, the fact that they read back, which was one of the strongest prosecution witnesses, and given the amount of evidence that the prosecution believed they had, certainly an argument could be made that they had heard the evidence, listened to the evidence, it was overwhelming, and there was nothing to talk about.
100, if not thousands, have gathered.
The next morning, throngs of curious trial watchers wait outside the courthouse. Dozens of police officers stand on tactical alert.
All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter.
Inside Judge Ito's courtroom, the defendant and the lawyers sweat it out. The jury enters. 150 million people are watching and waiting.
Woo!
All right, Mr. Simpson, would you please stand and face the jury? Mrs. Robertson.
Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, has in this case been convicted of at least one crime of murder of the first degree and one or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree to be not true.
Let's have it quiet in the courtroom, please.
The jury has set O.J. Simpson free.
Would you please poll the jurors?
It's a precautionary measure by Judge Ito to confirm that the jury is sure.
Juror number 1, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 2, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 3, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 8, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 9, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 10, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 11, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 12, as to count 2, is this your verdict?
From the victims' families, tears of disbelief.
Thank you.
From O.J. Simpson's family, tears of joy.
That was inside of the courtroom, right? That was the reaction inside of the courtroom. Well, something very interesting happened after that. When the Dream Team was given their, when they were given their interviews about what had gone on and the trial, their thoughts, their afterthoughts, this is what was said.
I think that from a standpoint of race, it was introduced by this witness, Furman. This stuff about playing a race card is preposterous. It would malpractice if a man has racist views in a case and a lawyer doesn't pursue that. Anybody who says that doesn't know how to try cases, doesn't know anything about anything. So you have to pursue it because that's your job.
But Robert Shapiro says he was always uncomfortable with the way Johnny Cochran dealt the race card.
There has been a difference of opinion with many of the lawyers. I said from the beginning that race was not an issue in this case and should not be an issue. I still feel the same way.
Shapiro would skip the defense team's victory party that night. Instead, he tells a reporter, quote, "Not only did we play the race card, we dealt it from the bottom of the deck."
That was a dirty blow. That was a dirty blow. But I'm going to tell you what it does. It reveals a few things. It revealed that even though this man was being paid by O.J. Simpson, his client, he still didn't believe in his true innocence like the rest of them. O.J. was smart to not have him lead the defense team, because had he allowed him to stay in the lead, because Johnny Cochran, remember, he was brought on. It was Robert Shapiro. This was the fellow who was the leader. Look at what he says. Look at what he said. Not only did we play the race card, we dealt it from the bottom of the deck. That means we cheated. I don't know if you guys have ever played any type of card game, but when you deal from the bottom of the deck, that means you're cheating. You're rigging the game. Had OJ not been the shrewd fella that he was, he might have been either executed or he might have spent the rest of his life in jail, because it was only afterwards did the contempt and the malice in this man's heart surface. And he was sitting right there. I always tell my children, be careful, be mindful of those people close to you, because hey, even the teeth bite the tongue. and they live together every single day. They're so close. But yeah, Robert Shapiro, he went on to do a whole lot of interviews where he said, I remember him saying later in later years, yeah, OJ, there's what's legal and then there's what's ethical. And we legally won, but OJ ethically lost. This was his lawyer. This was Robert Shapiro.
We are, all of us, profoundly disappointed with the verdict.
Prosecutors try to put a good face on their staggering defeat.
Everyone here has put in 110%, given their all for everyone, for justice, for the families of the victims, in the effort to see that the lives of Ron and Nicole were not thrown away.
We came here in search of justice. You'll have to be the judges, I expect, as to whether or not any of us found it today. But I'm not bitter, and I'm not angry. But I'd also like to thank the lawyers on our prosecution team. I am honored to have last June 13th, 94.
Home.
Forgive me. This is the jurors. This is one of the jurors. These are two of the jurors. They're gonna give you their perspective on how they ruled, what they found, and what led to that acquittal of O.J. Simpson. Pay good attention.
At 360 North Rockingham Avenue, O.J. Simpson revels in his victory.
Hey, Brenda.
Reporters stake out their first juror.
I think we did the right thing. You know, matter of fact, I know we did.
The next day, Brenda Moran defends the verdict.
We did this on the advice the court gave us. Weigh the evidence. We were fair. It wasn't a matter of sympathy. Wasn't a matter of favoritism. It was a matter of evidence.
Ann Aschenbach says that initially she voted guilty.
I still think very possibly he's guilty. The reason I voted that way, even though at the time I felt I'd probably have to vote not guilty based on my faith in the evidence, I was hoping maybe another juror or jurors would be able to convince me that the evidence was more credible than I really thought it was. That didn't happen. No one really thought it was credible.
Why didn't these jurors believe the so-called mountain of evidence against O.J. Simpson? One big reason is Mark Furman.
He had made a statement that a white woman and a black man together, and there was no problem, he would find a problem. So that made me, in my mind, think he's not credible. I couldn't believe anything he would say.
Seeing the type of character he was, I thought it was so possible that he would plant the glove and that same evidence have gotten into the Bronco. He was there too. That whole portion of it, you know, I couldn't depend on it. So I had to discard it.
Did the gloves fit O.J. Simpson or not?
In plain English, the glove didn't fit.
Was any of the state's evidence believable to any juror?
I think the wife-beating charges, you know, I believe that he had motive to do the crime. I believe he had time to do it, even though other jurors, you know, disagreed with that.
To me, that was a waste of time. This was a murder trial, not domestic abuse.
If I could have believed the blood and trace evidence, I could have voted guilty easily without wavering on it.
Days after his...
Yeah, so... yeah, young people, that was O.J. Simpson, and that was what that was the case, the trial of the century. That's how it ended. And I'm gonna end here. I'm gonna give my perspective. Number one, what do we learn about O.J.'s true legacy, or his legacy in American culture and American history? Well, first of all, we understand that O.J. Simpson did not happen in a vacuum. So the responses and the reactions that you saw from those communities, they were not necessarily driven upon. We saw it wasn't really on facts. Well, from one community, right? It wasn't, and from what we saw, it wasn't on. It wasn't based on facts. It wasn't based on evidence. Uh, it was based on framing, how it was framed. It was based on race. It was based on group thinking, right? I made up an acronym for race. It's a reality all cannot escape. Again, RACE, a reality all cannot escape. That's race. A lot of us like to take race out of anything American that has to do with justice. Well, all you have to do is read your history books. All you have to do is go back to Emmett Till. All you have to do is go back to Medgar Evers. All you have to do is go back to Martin Luther King. All you have to do is go back to Malcolm X. Many of you will say, well, black men killed Malcolm X. Yeah, but the CIA and the FBI are being sued as orchestrators of that crime, right? All you have to do is go back to George Floyd. I mean, not George Floyd, well, George Floyd, but George Zimmerman and what's his name? I forget his name. Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, and the cop. And by the way, George Zimmerman and that cop Darren Wilson, I think was his name. They all got support, great support from their community. They raised millions, and we saw these people killed. We saw them shot in cold blood. At least Mike Brown, and we heard the tapes with Trayvon Martin. So race can never be extracted from the interworkings in America, from all things. If you want that utopic, if you want that post-racial society, you're going to have to confront its ugly head straight on. You cannot take race out of any of this, and you're fooling yourself, whoever you are out there, if you think you can, because I'm here to tell you, you cannot. We don't see reality the same. We don't gauge reality the same culturally. We look at things differently. And that's apparent. And O.J. Simpson was the first black influential celebrity who blew the top off of that. Yeah, we're not as advanced as we claim to be. We like to purport, or we like to report we're a soup where everybody is meshed together and everybody has one objective, and we're all thriving together, when actually we're a salad. We're in this bowl, and we have different nations, different entities within the bowl. And yeah, while we might be close socially, philosophically, religiously, and definitely morally and ethically, we are as far apart as New York is to California in miles. But I think we can learn from OJ, because since OJ, we saw Michael Jackson, we saw Bill Cosby, and now we see Sean P. Diddy Combs. And it's the same formula. They've deemed this man guilty before any facts in the court of law have been presented. Now, before I forget, OJ triggered a lot of you because, like that juror said, he was in fact beating Nicole. Now, that was proven. I can say that because the evidence showed and proved that. But like the lady said, this wasn't a case of domestic violence. But I've heard people, right? I listen to people, and a lot of us think, well, he was a domestic violence monster. He has to be a killer. That's not justice, though. One of my favorite scenes in The Godfather, Bonacera at the beginning, he wanted Vito Corleone to kill those boys that raped his daughter and bruised her. Vito said, that is not justice. Your daughter's still alive. It's not justice that y'all want this man dead just because he was whooping her. Yeah, he was beating her, but that doesn't mean he killed her. It doesn't. And they didn't prove it. People are mad at OJ. You know, I kind of almost wanted to shed a tear for OJ when he died. Yeah, I did. Because I knew what he had gone through, right? And they ruined that man's life. And then they wanted to ruin his family's life. They duking it out in court right now, trying to get his estate. And people are saying things like, well, OJ died. We should remember Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown on the day that he died. No, we shouldn't. We remembered them 30 years ago when they died. What do you mean? He was acquitted. The evidence didn't prove that he killed them. You dishonor OJ when you add those murders to his death. Don't do that. Don't do that. OJ's resources allowed him to beat the system at its own game. His resources had OJ, I think it was Chris Rock who said, had OJ been bus driving Orenthal, he'd have been up under the jail. But see, OJ had the money. He went out and got him a dream team. And what does that say, brothers and sisters? That says that justice is for sale to the highest bidder. And if it's a black man, if you're a black man, you better have the resources. You better have the money. Bill Cosby did 36 months. He was innocent. That's why he got out. The Supreme Court threw it out. Michael Jackson, they wanted to drain that man. They still talking about him in death, posthumously. I think that's the word, posthumously, something like that. Even in death, they still trying to hang Mike. Resources. So what does that say about us blue collar workers who don't have the money to endure these long drawn out court proceedings? We're done. We're done. With all the evidence pointing to racism being involved in a murder trial, a white man is given a fine. You know, isn't that something? That a black man, that they found no evidence to support their claim of being a murderer. They have a white man up there who had mountains of evidence that showed he was a racist, he was a bigot, and he's let go of $200 fine. That's crazy. I wasn't for or against OJ because justice, you get what you deserve. But OJ Simpson was and is my brother. I didn't necessarily agree with everything that he did. I didn't agree maybe with his political stance in the black plight. He wasn't a Jim Brown. He didn't have to be. But he still was a brother who deserved respect. And he deserved justice, freedom, justice, and equality. And I want to leave you guys with our late great brother OJ, and let's see what OJ had to say about his case and what happened.
I've accepted a long time ago that a lot of the feelings that we're getting right now has nothing to do with Ron, Nicole, or me. It has to do with things that are going on in people's own lives, and their own animosities, their own prejudices have all come to the surface, during this case. But
yeah, man, I had to come and say something about OJ because OJ should never be forgotten, not only for his athletic prowess, not only for his universal marketability, but for what he meant for American culture and for the racial inner workings of this country. That's whether socially or in the judicial system. O.J. Simpson was the one who blew the top off of it and showed us, unfortunately, what was to come with many influential black men. It is only my conjecture that we learn from it. And you don't have to agree, you don't have to like it, but if you're going to be just, if you're going to call yourself a human being that believes in freedom, justice, and equality, how about you step back from your emotions, your triggering, even your experience, and look at evidence, look at facts, look at reasoning, and look at logic, because only then will that true knowledge, wisdom, and understanding be found. May we all meet in the light of understanding. I appreciate y'all sticking around, and make sure y'all like and subscribe, share this out. I'm gonna put this on my Twitter feed. I'm gonna put this on Facebook. I'm gonna put it on. It'll definitely be on YouTube. But I appreciate everybody who watched or who will watch. I'm sure y'all will enjoy it. Hey, peace and love, y'all.